Hello from Geneva. It's my privilege to be talking to you today. Thank you so much for inviting me here. There's a phrase in English football which says, "It's the hope that kills you." It means it's better not to hope that your team will win because it makes it that much harder to bear when they're defeated. But what is life without hope? Certainly no one would follow a football team if there was really no hope at all of victory. But having lived through 2020, perhaps now you might be tempted to agree that those who had fewer hopes for this year were spared the depth of the disappointments. Hopes of travels, hopes of time together with our families, our friends, our colleagues, hopes for new adventures, hopes for good health. But it seems as humans we are pre-wired to hope, to look forward, to plan, to learn new things, to work to make things better. We just can't help ourselves. And contrary to some people's opinions, aren't journalists humans too? As individuals, you will actually never meet a more hopeful person than a journalist. We do our jobs because we're hoping to make a difference. We work crazy hours and agonize over every word and picture because we believe, we hope, it will make life for someone, somewhere better. And that's why I always find it surprising that us journalists have a reputation for thinking negatively, but always looking for the worst in people, for pointing out what is wrong, rarely what is right, for always criticizing, rarely giving praise, or for spending thousands of words discussing what someone said and not enough on what someone did. And no doubt, you probably wouldn't be here watching today if you didn't have hope for a brighter future for journalism, a hope to change that stereotype, to be better. And is it the hope that kills us? Of course not. It's the hope that keeps us alive, what keeps us motivated. We know that the information we uncover in our jobs every day is power, and that the best way to use it is to empower everyone else by making sure they have access to the best quality information. And if 2020 has been a good year for anything, it can be argued that it has been good for public service journalism. This is journalism done, funded and controlled by the public for the public. At the European Broadcasting Union, I work with more than 60 public service newsrooms. And while production in almost every other area of broadcasting fell this year, news increased programming by more than 20%. Audiences for evening news bulletins were up 250%. For a brief moment, TV audiences reversed the declines of the last 30 years. Even young people were watching the evening news. But it was, of course, the digital platforms which saw the most sustained success. Younger, digital-first audiences discovered public service media brands, some for the first time, and they liked what they saw. The brands they'd associated with their parents, and let's be honest, their grandparents, were surprising them, delivering them what they wanted, where they wanted it, and in a format they wanted to engage with. The idea that national broadcasters were dinosaurs, incapable of changing quickly and destined for oblivion, was rendered extinct in 2020. Journalists even surprised themselves with how quickly they adapted and with how creative they were able to be under intense COVID restrictions and public scrutiny. Yes, it has been exhausting. Yes, it has been frustrating, dangerous even. But it has mattered and it has been appreciated and it has saved and changed lives. And if that's what you're in this business hoping to do, 2020 has been a successful year. After a rough few years of alternative facts, a war against experts, and the exponential growth of unregulated platforms which have destroyed the business model of commercially funded journalism, the fact is, people suddenly remembered that truth matters, that truth really can mean the difference between life and death, that where we get our information from is important, and that journalism and public service media are precious. And I don't know about you, but as tired and bruised as we are from 2020, this is definitely an upside. We may not have wished to get here like this, but we have been yearning for this moment. So what do we do about it? How do we respond? Maybe it's not how you expected it to be. After all, there is no let-up in the attacks on journalists, on the values we stand for. In fact, the pandemic has brought out the worst in those who like to shoot the messenger when they don't like the message. And the demand for information has been insatiable. We haven't kept up. No matter how much quality journalism we produced this year, people wanted more, and we lost them, lured by the honey trap of closed groups, caught in the web of disinformation. Many people are confused, struggling to know what to believe. So how is this a positive moment? Our budgets are lower than ever before. Everyone is having to do more for less. TV and radio reporters are going live from their phones. Sub-editors are writing headlines on their beds. And yet before you say standards are dropping, have a look at an old television news programme, an old newspaper front page, listen to an old radio documentary, and then you tell me that standards are dropping. They are not. Because journalists always want to make things better. They always want to improve. So just as for almost every other industry out there, how we respond in 2021 is going to be critical. We hope we will no longer be in crisis mode, but the bold ideas and decisions that the crisis forced on us must continue. This needs to be a decisive moment for journalism. No one is in any doubt that we are living and reporting in a time where the sands shift so quickly under our feet, we often wonder how we remain upright at all. Or we find ourselves chasing an ever-retreating tide, only to spot the tsunami on the horizon and end up running frantically back in the opposite direction. The fact is, changing everything about how we work, all at the same time, under all sorts of pressure, is not straightforward. But this is, to coin an awful new phrase, the new normal. And it was before COVID. Change is not only necessary, it is desirable, and it must be perpetual. And I think that's what a lot of people in our industry struggle with. In the past, we have all run or been involved in big change projects, and we treat them like a flight of stairs. We push everyone up the stairs. It's super hard work, but you persevere and you get to the top. Phew, I've made the change. Time to take a breather. And then a while later, you do it again. Take the next flight of stairs, get everyone up to the top. We've done the change. Time to relax for a bit. No, we need to think differently about this. Instead of flights of stairs, think about those cool travelators which glide you and everyone else on them relentlessly upwards. Change needs to be perpetual. It should not be a struggle. It needs to be sustainable as part of our everyday work. But how? It's all very well me having metaphors about stairs and travelators, but how do we embrace change to such an extent that we no longer notice it? To start with, we need to be more humble. That doesn't mean the type of public service media type of humble, the one where they get so used to criticism they forget to tell everyone how utterly brilliant and indispensable they are. No, being humble means letting go of our assumptions, frankly our biases, about how journalism should be done. Journalism doesn't have rules, it has values. That's probably why if you tell most journalists they can't do something, They go out of their way to prove that they can. And it means we should never get stuck on telling certain types of stories or using certain types of storytelling. We must stick to our values, but we must experiment. So when ARD, the producers of Germany's highest rating and most formal news brand Tagesschau, decided to experiment with TikTok, I can only imagine the raised eyebrows. But TikTok reaches an audience Tagesschau does not, or did not. More than 700,000 followers later, they found something which works. Why did you get into the news business? What was it about journalism that made you think, that's for me? Luckily for you, I'm not one of those annoying people who says I got into journalism by accident. I always wonder how those people did it. I didn't. I chose to become a journalist, but because I couldn't think of anything more interesting to do. And I still can't think of anything more interesting than being a journalist. Every day is different. And while we can all find change difficult, we should remind ourselves that change is what brought many of us here in the first place. We didn't want jobs which were the same day in, day out. Is it just me that when asked to state your profession for an official form or something, you say journalist with a hint of pride? I think I like it even more now that I'm an editor, a head of news. Journalist is no longer in my job title, but it's my profession. It's my vocation. It's also a massive privilege, not only to be able to witness the events which really do change the course of history, but also to have that heavy weight of responsibility for delivering accurate and impartial information. So let's go back to humility for a second. Without any rules, but with values, who decides what good journalism is? What is accurate and impartial? It's a question being asked openly in public these days. But let's not be defensive. What is the answer? It's all of us. All of us decide. The journalism industry is like the biggest peer review community in the world. But to be successful, that community, all of us, needs to have the widest range of voices possible, and it needs to make sure that all of those voices are heard. Being humble means knowing that your point of view is not the only one, that however long you've been in this business, you always have something to learn, and the person who teaches you is probably not like you. To serve our audiences, we need to be like them. We need to know what it's like to be in their shoes. Of course, you can't live anyone else's life but your own, but collectively, together, we can be better at this. Just look at today for evidence. A global event where you're going to hear thousands of different opinions about how to improve journalism. No one person today has the answers, but together, with the diversity of backgrounds represented, we will make progress. Today, I want you to feel inspired. After a tough year, I want you to know how important what you do is, and that the best thing you can do every day is great journalism, which reaches as many people as possible and has impact. But it's sadly not the only thing we need to do these days. Let our journalism speak for itself, everyone says, for sure. But we also need to stand up for ourselves and for our values. We can't stand by as commercially funded journalism is laid to waste by an ad tech industry gone out of control. As public service media organisations are attacked or compromised by their own governments. As social media companies, financially and politically bigger than some countries, become untouchable. Where consumers have become the product. And quality news is struggling to make itself heard against the noise of vested interests and political interference. There's no going back in time, but there are choices ahead. Many of the people I've worked with in my career are the cleverest people I have ever met. So damn smart. But the smartest never realise they're the smartest because they're always focusing on what needs to improve. They're always trying to make themselves and everything around them better. Don't stop hoping. Don't miss this moment. Remember your values, be humble, and most importantly, embrace the change. The future of journalism depends on you. You've got 24 hours.